Chapter 9. My first case of flux, old methods, more cases, believed to be possessed of the devil, prayers from fools, a dislocated neck, leaving Macon, at Kirksville, Mother Ivy, Dr. F.A. Grove, Judge Linder, Chen's Cheering Way, Robert Harris, a helpless cripple, typhoid fever, feeble in health and purse, punching for inebriancy, and ointment for drunkenness. During the autumn I had an excellent opportunity to test osteopathy on fall diseases, such as flux among children, bowel complaint, and fevers. My first case of flux was a little boy of about 4 summers. I was walking down the streets of Macon in company with the Colonel Eberman when I drew his attention to fresh blood which had dripped along the street for 50 yards. A little in advance of us was a lady and 2 or 3 children slowly moving in the same direction we were going. We caught up with them and discovered that her little boy, about 4 years old, was very sick, had only a calico dress on, and to our wonder and surprise, his legs and feet, which were bare, were covered with blood from his body down to the ground. A single glance was sufficient to convince us that they were poor, and the Colonel and I, feeling a wave of pity in our hearts, spoke gently to the mother and offered our aid to get her sick children home. She accepted. I picked up the little sick boy, while the Colonel took one from the mother's arms that she had carried until she was almost exhausted. I placed my hand on the back of the little fellow I carried, in the region of the lumbar, which was very warm, even hot, while the abdomen was cold. My only thought was to help the woman and her children home, and little dreamed that I was to make a discovery that would bless future generations. While walking along, I thought it strange that the back was so hot and the belly so cold. Then the neck and back of his head were very warm, and the face, nose, and forehead cold. I began to reason, for I knew very little about flux, more than it killed young and old, and was worse in Kentucky in warm weather than in some other states. In all my life, I had never asked myself what flux was, and no medical author that I had read had told me whether it was a being such as symptomatology would divide up by symptoms and put together and call the creature he had made out of guesses flux. I did not know how to reason on diseases, because all the authorities I had read or met in council could not get their eye off the effects rather than the cause. They met pain by anti-pain medicines, and bleeding of bowels by astringents that closed the issues from which the blood came, following such remedies to death's door, and then lined up for another battle and defeat with the same old failing remedies and open fire all along the line on symptoms only. I wondered why doctors were so badly frightened when flux visited their own families if their remedies were to be trusted. I knew that a person had a spinal cord, but really I knew little. I knew that a person had a spinal cord, but really I knew little, if anything, of its use. I had seen in reading anatomy that at the upper portion of the body on the front side of the spinal cord supplied the motor nerves, and the back side of the cord the sensory nerves. But that gave no very great clue to what to do for flux. As I began at the base of the brain, and thought by pressures and rubbings I could push some of the hot to cold places, and in doing so I found rigid and loose places on the muscles and ligaments of the whole spine, while the lumbar was in very congested condition. I worked for a few minutes on that philosophy, and told the mother to report next day. If I could do anything more for her boy, I would cheerfully do so. She came early next morning with the news that her child was well. Flux was in a large percent of the families of Macon. The reader will remember that my home at that time was still in Baldwin, Kansas, and I was only visiting in Macon. The lady whose child I had cured brought many others and their sick children to me for treatment. As nearly as I can remember, I had 17 severe cases of flux in a few days, and cured all without drugs. Other cases of summer and fall diseases appeared in the city, and I was called to treat many, which I did with success. I soon found myself in possession of a large practice. I was not so much surprised to learn that all kinds of fevers, summer, and fall diseases could be cured without drugs as to hear that a Methodist preacher had assembled my brother's wife and children for the purpose of prayers. He turned fool, or was born that way, as many hurried births have in all ages produced idiots, and the old theological blank poured out his idiotic soul to the Lord telling him my father was a good man and a saint in heaven, while he was of the opinion that I was a hopeless sinner and had better have the wind taken away before I got any worse. He stirred up such a hoorah and hatred in Macon, and it ran in such a stage that those who he could influence believed I was crazy. Children gave me all the road because I said I did not believe God was a whiskey and opium drug doctor, that I believed when he made man that he had put a large many legs, noses, tongues, and qualities as he needed for any purpose in life for remedies and comfort. For such arguments I was called an infidel, crank, crazy, and God was advised by such theological hooting owls to kill me and save the lambs. During this early crusade against me, I was called to see a young lady said to be helplessly ill with nervous prostration from fall heats. All hope had been abandoned, and she had been given up to die. At the end of a number of medical counsels, her father came to me and said, "My daughter is very sick, and the doctors say cannot live." He then asked me to step in and look at her. He was a pleasant and appeared to be a very sensible man, so I just went to please him. I found the young lady in bed, and from the twisted way her head lay on the pillow, I suspected a partial dislocation of her neck. On examination, I found the atlas, or first joint, of her neck 1/2 inch too far back, so it had shut off the vertebral artery from supplying the brain. I carefully adjusted her neck, and in 4 hours she was out of bed, slicking up for company. Then other prayers were soon sent up to tell the Lord that I was possessed of the devil. Her pa said the devil must have $50, so he gave it to me to send my wife and babies in Kansas, who were in need of grub, as Kansas was then eaten up by grasshoppers. I don't think the Lord listened to such howling old fools who would kill the cow with the carnal sword if she gave a bushel of milk with a drop of progress in it. My father was a preacher, but no fool for popularity among the ignorant. I was like good old Paul, who could not be in person always with sensible people, but was with them in spirit. Long since osteopathy had had a big welcome in Macon City. They weep and mourn because they did not know a truth from a lie, and helped me build an infirmary there and make Macon the Athens of learning instead of the rival town in an adjoining city. I bade them adieu in 1875, went to Kirksville, found some 3 or 4 thanking people who welcomed me and my baby, osteopathy. One dear old mother was by the name of Ivy, gave me rooms and board without charge for a month. I had no money, but she was an old Baptist who said, "Feed my lambs," was her religion. Long since she had been at rest, but her kind old face will never fade from my memory. A dear man named F.A. Grove, M.D., proved another friend. He was a man of principle and finely educated. He came to me, he said, to welcome me to the town of Kirksville, then with about 1,500 inhabitants. He had been around the world and found that some spots grew little trees of progress. He and I were friends to his grave. He helped me much to unfold the truths of this science. Had he lived today, he would be my helper in the flesh, but while he lived, he aided me to oil the wheels of progress. When I began to prove my work by actual results in Mother Evie's hotel, a good-hearted man of sense named Charlie Chin rented to me a full suite of rooms over his store, though he knew I had no money. Judge Linder, who knew me from a boy, came to me and said, "I will stay with you and help you for 6 months, for I see truth all over your philosophy." He stayed through the summer and did well. He had mines of silver in Arizona and left for them. I never saw him again, but I remember his strong arm and good advice, and will love him with my last breath. Charlie Chin acted the man, and while I was with him, although he was a champ belite, I felt as if I was at a good old Methodist love feast. He always had something good to say that would cheer me up in my gloomiest hours. He would pat me on the back and say, "Shout on, brother. One day you will outride the storm." He never said, "Your rent is due. I must have my pay or possession of my rooms." He proved himself the kind of a man to tie to. I tied to him, and he got all the money I owed him. but the debt of gratitude I can never pay unless I take the benefit of the bankrupt law, and I am opposed to that, for it never pays debts. So I will ever let the debt hang over me, paying a little at a time, and leaving the remainder for my children to settle when I am gone. Early in my career,